Welcome to our deep dive. We're going to be taking a look at leadership psychology today.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah. I think, we all kind of think we know what leadership is, right?
Hmm.
But then we get into these like really fascinating research studies, and it's way more complicated than I think any of us imagine.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you sent me some excerpts from The Psychology of Leadership, New Perspectives and Research, and I thought it'd be fun to kind of dive into those with you today.
Fantastic. Yeah, looking forward to it.
So one of the first things that just kind of jumped out at me was there was this research study
Yeah.
where researchers actually used AI
Oh, wow.
to analyze 290 popular leadership books.
Yeah, that's the work of Blind Mindel.
Yeah.
And they used a Cahonin self-organizing map,
Oh, okay.
which is really interesting because it's a type of AI
Mm.
that really allowed them to analyze not just the content of the books, but also, how the information was structured and presented.
It's like they were trying to break the code of leadership advice.
Exactly. Yeah. They were really trying to understand, what are the common threads? What are the patterns that emerge across this vast body of literature on leadership?
Yeah, so what did they find? What was some of the kind of key takeaways there?
Well, one of the most striking findings was that a surprising 29% of these books actually focused on leadership outside of like traditional business settings.
Hmm.
So, we're talking about military leaders, historical figures, even, coaches and athletes.
It's like they're looking for universal leadership principles.
Yeah, this suggests this real hunger for, the idea that what makes a great leader in one context will translate to success in any field, right?
Right.
Whether you're, leading a platoon of soldiers or a team of software engineers or even, a sports team.
Right. But is it that simple?
That's the question, right?
Yeah.
And as we kind of delve deeper into the research, we see that, it's not always that straightforward. But yeah, it's fascinating that there's this sort of search for these universal principles.
Yeah, it makes me wonder, are we kind of, you know, in a way almost looking for like easy answers in a field that's inherently complex?
Possibly, yeah. I mean, leadership is messy. It's unpredictable, and these books, they often present leadership as something attainable, as if there's a formula, but the reality is far more nuanced than that.
Right. Yeah, it's not like a recipe you can follow, is it?
Exactly. Yeah. There's no one size fits all approach.
So what were some of the other things that they, found in these books? What were like the common themes?
Right. So they identified 6 clusters of leadership books,
Yeah.
and the topics range from learning from CEOs and executives to gleaning wisdom from historical figures. But despite this diversity, some common themes did emerge. Things like change.
Okay.
This idea that leaders are agents of change, expert appeal. So this reliance on gurus and thought leaders,
Hmm.
and self-actualization. This idea that leadership is about becoming the best version of yourself.
It's like they're selling the idea that anyone can become a great leader if they just follow the right steps.
Right, and that's where the irony lies, right?
Okay.
Because while these books present leadership as something attainable, as something, if you just follow these steps, you'll be a great leader, real-life leadership, is messy,
Right.
is unpredictable.
Right.
Leaders, even the most celebrated ones, they make mistakes. They
Yeah.
face setbacks.
Yeah, and sometimes their impact isn't always like super straightforward, I would imagine.
Exactly, yeah. It's a complex, system.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that leadership is not just a set of traits or like we were saying a recipe, but it's a dynamic process
That's
that
so
unfolds in the real world with all of its complexities and stuff.
Yeah, it's about navigating those complexities and those uncertainties and those ambiguities.
Yeah, speaking of complexities, I was particularly struck by Richard Hackman's work on effective leadership conditions.
Yeah, his work is fascinating.
So he asked us to kind of imagine these two contrasting team experiences, right? One that's like incredibly successful,
Right.
and the other that's just like completely frustrating.
Yeah, we've all been there.
Oh, for sure. And then he kind of throws out this thought-provoking question. Do great leaders actually cause great teams?
It's a great question, right?
Yeah.
Because it challenges this notion of the leader attribution error, which is our tendency to give leaders too much credit when things go well
Okay.
and too much blame when things fall apart. And Hackman suggests that, instead of focusing on what leaders do to create great teams, we should be looking at the conditions
Oh,
that makes success more likely. So it's not about, the leader as the sole cause of success, but rather the leader as a creator of the conditions that enable success.
so almost like, is it a chicken or the egg kind of thing? Which comes first, like the great leader or the high performing team?
Yeah, it's a bit of a dilemma, isn't it?
Yeah.
And Hackman, he uses this analogy of a conductor-centric orchestra,
Okay.
right? Where, it might be a model of efficiency,
Mm-hmm.
but it can also stifle individual creativity and expression. And he raises the question, do we really want workplaces where everyone simply follows the leader's every command?
Or is there like a better way to think about this whole dynamic?
Exactly.
I mean, I certainly wouldn't want to be in that kind of work environment where it's just like following orders all the time.
Yeah, it doesn't really foster, innovation or creativity or a sense of ownership, right?
Right. So I think you said he kind of outlines these 4 key conditions for team success.
He does, yeah.
What are those?
So the first one is real teams.
Okay.
And by that, he's emphasizing that, a real team isn't just a random group of people thrown together.
Yeah.
It's about creating a sense of interdependence,
Mm.
where members share common goals and they understand that their individual contributions are essential to the collective success.
So just slapping a label on a group and saying, hey, you're a team now,
Right.
doesn't actually make them function as one.
Exactly. Yeah. It's about fostering that deeper level of connection and shared purpose.
Yeah, and I guess that kind of leads into the second one that you mentioned, right? The compelling direction.
It does, yeah. So compelling direction is all about, having this clear and engaging vision
Mm-hmm.
that motivates the team, but also allows for their input and ownership. A leader shouldn't just dictate the path, right? They should inspire the team to buy into the journey.
This is making me think about all that research on like optimal team size.
Yeah.
Where I think it was found that like as teams get larger, communication breakdowns and coordination problems, like they become way more likely.
That's a great example of what Hackman calls enabling design.
Okay, yeah. So what is that exactly?
So enabling design is all about, creating the right structures and processes to support the team's work.
Mm-hmm.
So this includes things like team size, communication channels, decision-making procedures, even, the physical workspace itself.
So it's like setting the stage, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You can have the most talented actors in the world,
Right.
but if the stage is poorly designed,
Right.
the performance is going to suffer.
Yeah, it's not going to go well. And then you mentioned expert coaching. Is that about having like a skilled director to guide that performance?
Yeah, you could say that. So expert coaching is about the leader helping the team learn how to work together effectively.
Mm-hmm.
Navigating interpersonal dynamics, fostering a positive and productive team climate. But here's a surprising finding from Wageman's research. Enabling design actually has a much greater impact on team success than expert coaching.
Oh, wow. That's kind of counterintuitive.
It is, yeah.
I would think that a really great coach could like overcome almost any obstacle.
It's tempting to think that, right? But it really highlights the importance of getting the foundation right. You can have the most inspirational leader in the world, but if the team's structure is fundamentally flawed, their effectiveness is going to be limited.
So even if you have all 4 of these conditions in place,
Yeah.
it doesn't guarantee success.
It doesn't, no.
Okay.
It's about creating a fertile ground
Yeah.
where great things can happen. But ultimately, the team's success depends on, how they interact, how they work together within that context.
Right. So it's not a guaranteed formula.
Exactly.
It's more about, setting the right conditions and then seeing what happens.
It's about increasing the likelihood of success, but there are always other factors at play. The team's dynamics, the nature of the task, the external environment.
So it's really about, as a leader, like you're setting the stage, but you can't completely control the play, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're creating the environment, you're providing the support, but ultimately the team has to perform, they have to do the work.
Right. Yeah.
And that's where the real magic happens, right?
Yeah.
When a team comes together and they gel and they achieve something extraordinary.
So it's kind of like you're creating the potential, but you're not dictating the outcome.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Okay, so we've talked about how the conditions a leader creates can really make or break a team.
Mm-hmm.
But now let's look at the relationship between leaders and followers.
Okay.
Like, why do people follow? Why do people lead? Like, what's going on there?
Right. Well, Messick's work on the psychological exchange between leaders and followers gives us a lot to think about there. It's not just, a one-way street.
Right.
Leader says jump, follower says how high. It's more like a give and take. Both sides get something out of it.
Oh, this idea of a psychological exchange makes a lot of sense to me. It's like it makes leadership seem less about, some magical traits you're born with and
Right.
more about like a back and forth between, what leaders need and what followers need. Right.
Exactly.
So
So,
what's in it for both sides? Like what do leaders bring and what do they get back?
well, leaders, they offer a few key things. First off, conviction and a plan. They got to convince people to follow them on this path to reach these tough goals.
You know what that reminds me of? Shackleton.
Oh, yeah.
The Antarctic explorer. I mean, when his ship got crushed in the ice, he managed to get his crew through like the most incredible hardships.
It's an incredible story of leadership.
They survived
Yeah.
against all odds. I
Yeah.
mean, his commitment, his ability to adapt, just incredible.
It shows how powerful a leader's conviction can be,
Right.
even when things are really, really rough.
Right. And it's not just about those like epic adventures.
No, no, no.
I mean, good leaders create a sense of safety and support for their followers, even in just like everyday situations.
Absolutely. That's so important. Making people feel safe, making people feel valued. That's how you build trust.
Right. So it's about creating that culture of trust so people feel comfortable taking risks, sharing ideas, without being afraid of judgment or being shut down.
Exactly. And that leads right into the next thing leaders provide, fairness and respect.
Okay.
If you treat people right, if you listen to them, value their contributions, that's how you get people to really trust you, to be loyal. There's this great example with Colonel Goethals, the guy who oversaw the Panama Canal.
Oh, right. Wasn't he the one who like had these open door meetings?
Yeah, every Sunday he'd let any worker come to his office and just complain. Didn't matter what it was, big or small.
Seems pretty radical for that time period,
It was. But it made a huge difference for morale and productivity. People felt like they were heard, like they were treated fairly.
It just goes to show sometimes it's those little things, those
Mhm.
little gestures that can really change the whole dynamic of a team.
Absolutely.
If you're listening to people's concerns, even the ones that seem small, it creates that feeling of we're all in this together.
And that leads us to the final thing leaders provide,
Yeah.
meaning and purpose.
Okay.
They got to help people
Oh.
connect their work to something bigger, make it feel like it matters, like it's part of something important.
Oh, that totally makes sense. It's about tapping into that intrinsic motivation,
Yeah.
that desire to contribute to something beyond just, ourselves.
People want to feel like they're making a difference. Leaders help them see how they do.
Right, but we got to remember this is a two-way street.
It is.
Right, it's an exchange.
Absolutely.
Leaders get something out of this too, not just giving stuff away. So, what motivates people to take on the challenges of leadership?
Well, two big things come to mind, loyalty and vicarious achievement. When leaders provide protection, support, fairness, all those things we talked about, followers often return the favor with loyalty. They feel like they owe something back.
It's like that basic human instinct of you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours.
Exactly. And that sense of loyalty, that's gold for a leader.
Right.
It binds people to them. It pushes them to support the leader's vision, and it just makes the whole group stronger.
So it's about creating a shared purpose.
Yeah.
Everyone working together toward the same goal.
And then there's vicarious achievement.
Vicarious achievement.
It's the idea that leaders feel proud, accomplished when their followers succeed.
Oh, I get it. Like, think about how we feel when our country wins a bunch of medals at the Olympics.
Exactly. We feel like we're part of that win, even though we were just sitting on the couch.
Right.
It's that feeling of we did it, even though we means they. And for leaders, that feeling is even stronger. Their sense of accomplishment is tied to what their followers achieve.
It's not just about, being the boss, calling the shots.
No.
It's about being part of something bigger, working toward a shared vision and feeling fulfilled when the group succeeds.
It adds a whole new layer to our understanding of what leadership is all about. But there's another piece to this puzzle we need to look at. How does our own group membership shape our idea of who a leader is?
Oh, interesting.
That takes us into the realm of social identity and leadership. Hogg did some groundbreaking work in this area.
So it's not just about the leader's traits.
Right.
It's about how those traits fit into the values and the norms of the group.
Exactly. What makes a fantastic leader in one group might be a total flop in another. Context matters.
It's kind of like, different strokes for different folks, right?
In a way, yeah. Hogg says we like leaders who embody what he calls the group prototype, basically the values, beliefs, behaviors that define what it means to be a member of that group.
So we're drawn to leaders who reflect back to us the qualities we admire in that specific setting.
Precisely. So, a tech startup leader might need to be all about innovation and risk-taking.
Whereas someone leading a nonprofit might need to be more compassionate, focused on social responsibility,
Exactly.
different contexts, different needs.
And, this idea has roots in some pretty classic psychology. Even Freud talked about leaders embodying the group's standards.
Really?
Yeah, he said they represent the group's ideals in a kind of pure form.
So maybe we're drawn to leaders who represent like the best version of ourselves within that group.
Interesting thought, isn't it? And this has real-world consequences. Think about mergers and acquisitions.
Oh, yeah. Don't those often fail because of clashing identities?
They do. People coming from different companies have different ideas about what good leadership looks like.
Hmm.
When two companies merge, one of the biggest challenges is figuring out who does the leader belong to now?
Right, like who's their primary loyalty. It's got to be tricky.
It is. If the leader seems to favor one group over the other, well, that can breed resentment and really mess up the whole integration process.
Yeah, so leaders in those situations have to walk a tightrope,
They do.
create a sense of unity without alienating anyone.
It's about finding a way to bridge those different identities.
Right. So how do they do that?
Well, that brings us to a fascinating concept called depersonalization.
Depersonalization. Sounds a little intense.
Don't worry, it's not as bad as it sounds. In leadership, depersonalization just means that good leaders put the group's needs ahead of their personal relationships with individual members.
Oh, okay. So it's like treating everyone fairly, impartially.
Exactly. No playing favorites, no letting personal feelings cloud your judgment.
Makes sense. But didn't Hogg find that in really strong, cohesive groups, followers actually want the leader to favor certain members?
You're right. He called it circumscribed depersonalization.
Circumscribed depersonalization. That's a mouthful.
It is, but it basically means that while followers want fairness, they also want the leader to recognize and even favor those members who really embody the group's values.
So it's like a balance between treating everyone equally and acknowledging the people who best represent the group's ideals.
Exactly. It's a delicate dance,
Yeah.
but it just goes to show how complex leadership is. It's
Yeah.
not just about personality or style. It's about understanding all the social and psychological forces that shape how we see and react to leadership.
We've talked a lot about the dynamics between, leaders and followers, but we haven't really touched on power itself.
Yeah.
How does power affect the people who have it?
Power, it's a fascinating thing, isn't it? It can bring out the best in us, but it can also,
Yeah, it can corrupt.
Right. Absolutely. And understanding how power impacts leaders psychologically, it's really important if we want to think about leadership ethically.
Right, because we all know that saying, power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely, and
Yeah.
and we've seen it time and time again throughout history.
Yeah.
People in power, they can become, tyrants.
Absolutely, yes.
They abuse their power.
It's a real danger.
So what's going on there psychologically? What are the mechanisms at play?
Well, there's some really interesting research by McGee, Gruenfeld, Keltner, and Galinsky.
Okay.
They found that power can really change how leaders think and act.
Okay, how so?
For one thing, power tends to make people more action-oriented.
So they're more likely to just jump into things.
Exactly. They feel this sense of urgency, like they need to make decisions quickly.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes that means they don't fully consider all the consequences.
So it's not that power makes people inherently bad, but it can lead to more impulsive behavior, less careful thought.
Exactly, yeah. And power can also create this sense of, well, invincibility.
Oh, I see.
Like, I'm in charge, I can do whatever I want.
Right, the rules don't apply.
That kind of thinking. And that can lead to disinhibition, where they lose those normal checks on their behavior.
Okay.
They might give in to temptations they would normally resist,
Yeah.
take risks they wouldn't normally take.
So it's almost like power creates this blind spot where leaders, they don't see the potential downsides of their actions.
Yeah, you could say that it's like they're playing by a different set of rules.
That's a little scary, isn't it?
It is in this disinhibition. It can show up in all sorts of ways, from, reckless financial decisions to, inappropriate behavior in their personal lives.
Right.
The research suggests that power doesn't necessarily change who a person is deep down, but it can make those pre-existing tendencies stronger, and it can weaken their self-control.
Hmm. That's pretty sobering. Makes you wonder, like, is there anything we can do to stop this, to prevent power from corrupting people?
Well, it's both about choosing the right people for leadership roles
Okay.
and about putting safeguards in place.
So, like, what kind of safeguards?
Well, one of the most important is accountability.
Okay.
If leaders know they'll be held responsible for their actions, they're less likely to, abuse their power.
So, systems of checks and balances, making sure leaders are transparent in their decision making.
Exactly. Transparency, accountability, and a culture of ethical behavior. Those are key to keeping power in check.
That makes a lot of sense. You know, all this talk about power, it makes me think about how we judge leaders, both while they're still in power and after they're gone.
hmm
And there was this study about how our views of leaders change after they die.
Oh, yes. Allison and Alon, they found that we tend to view dead leaders more positively than when they were alive.
Really? It's like once they're gone, we forget all the bad
There's
stuff.
a bit of that. It's called the death positivity bias. Death kind of softens our judgments. We focus on their achievements, their positive qualities, and we tend to overlook the negative.
I guess it makes sense. Death is final. There's no more holding them accountable, so maybe we're more willing to forgive.
There's a sense of closure, maybe,
Mm.
but of course, it's not always so simple.
Right. Like, what about leaders who were really unethical, who did some truly awful things? Does death really erase all that?
That's where the death positivity bias gets more complicated. For those leaders, death can actually make their bad deeds stand out even more. Their misdeeds become more prominent, their reputation might actually take a bigger hit.
It's like their actions are frozen in time, stripped of context, judged solely on what they did, not who they were.
It raises some really interesting questions about how we evaluate leaders, both living and dead. Do we allow for growth and change? Do we recognize the pressures they face? Or do we expect them to be perfect?
It's a tough question, and there are no easy answers. But this deep dive, it's given us a lot to think about leadership. It's way more complex than we often
It's
realize.
not just about identifying traits or analyzing decisions. It's about understanding all those psychological factors, the dynamics between leaders and followers, the ethical dimensions of power.
Yeah, and we've covered so much ground, from analyzing leadership books to how our own group identities shape our perceptions of leadership.
And what's really fascinating is that these insights, they're not just for CEOs or politicians. They apply to all of us in our everyday lives.
Yeah, leadership isn't just about a title or a position.
No, it's something we can all practice in our families, our communities, our workplaces.
It's about how we interact with others, how we influence and inspire them.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'd encourage you to reflect on what you've learned. What kind of leader do you want to be? What values will guide you? How can you use this knowledge to make a positive difference in your own life?
Yeah, leadership is a journey, not a destination. And the more we learn, the more effective, more ethical leaders we can become.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this exploration of leadership psychology. We hope you found it insightful and maybe even a little bit challenging.
It's been a pleasure.
And we hope you'll join us again for our next deep dive.